Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Great CEO podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Pivnik, and today with me, I have another great CEO, Micahel Walters, and from Studio 503. Great to
Yeah.
have you today, Michael.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You bet, you bet. So, in a few words, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Sure. Uh, the company's Studio 503. I started it almost 20 years ago. Took a job in a big company leaving college, realized after a few years that I was ready to go do my own thing. So I started this a number of years ago and kind of never looked back. Just kind of, worked on building out and growing basically a business development uh, company, one that didn't exist. I don't know if I ever told you the history or not, but it basically
Sure.
is it's like the company of and. So working in corporate, usually you fit in a box,
Sure.
and this business was built to kind of say why not, and if so, there's nothing that says you can't go do this and that.
Okay, I love that. A company of vans. That's fantastic. So what is your competitive differentiator? How do you win clients over competitors?
Yeah, well, it started out, I mean, the foundation of Studio 503 is a lot of CPG at large retail, the Walmart, the Targets, the Costco's of the world, and learning how to do business with ultra large tier one retail at a high level,
Okay.
even though you're a small mid-sized business. And that's usually there's a gap there usually between the ability to actually execute and maintain, let alone get in, but maintain your business at large retail. We learned early on how we differentiated was by being extremely nimble,
Okay.
whereas most of the vendors at large retail, it's almost like the Titanic versus the jet ski, if that makes sense. So
Sure.
the other differentiator was hyper accountability and total responsibility throughout the entire process. So one of the things that I learned when you go in and you listen to your different merchants and buyers, and it was uniform, like across all the different retailers, it didn't matter. The frustration is that a lot of their vendors, the salesperson wasn't really connected to logistics, and they weren't really connected to
Right.
marketing or planogram management. So being able to work quickly and work with one team and be able to have that be an entire total value propositions of expertise really kind of was the inception of it. Said, hey, well, what if we could go out and build a strategic account management firm or even become the vendor, but have the salespeople actually be not just the account expert, but understand the logistics, all of the metrics, merchandising, planogram, assortment, brand. So working at Studio 503, you really had to want to almost be a mini, like an entrepreneur
Sure.
in learning that customer, all the different facets, almost like becoming a marionette or a puppet master, so that when we went in and worked on trying to win a new client or a new retailer, our big differentiator was we could speak all the pieces. That account manager was the person who was the expert on logistics and supply
That's
chain.
great. So the customer basically has a one-stop shop in their primary contact that can help them on all facets of the account.
Right. Versus like, well, you know what? Let me go back and I'll get back to you was kind of the,
Sure.
the typical answer.
Yeah.
So we learned by doing that really well, we grew really fast and had strong, we're outperforming really large companies by having a much deeper understanding and expertise of the client's business. And that kind of was what really started to separate us in our growth was we realized it didn't matter the widget or the industry or category, that knowledge of knowing how to do business with large retail from even a very small company, that there was something there of value that then we could go out and partner with other brands and companies
Got it.
to either not necessarily bring their products in from scratch, but for those that already had built or had a relationship there or already had one business but realized that they were really struggling to execute at a high level and were at risk of maybe losing that vendor position. That's usually where we could come in and really shore that up and
Okay.
repair and
So,
restore.
so how long are your typical contracts, and like what percentage of your revenue is recurring revenue versus one-time, project-based revenue?
Yeah, it's almost all recurring. So usually we partner long term. So,
Okay.
what we come in, it usually kind of, there's a way you do it, right? There's a knowledge or an expertise about how you paint, like as an artist, how you do account management. There's definitely some systems and processes, but the artist matters.
Hmm.
And when we usually come in and partner with companies, it's really to take that relationship over and say, you focus on what you're really strong at, what got you to this point, and let us focus on this point forward all the way through point of sale with the retailer. And that turns into basically a perpetual relationship,
Okay.
unless there is a circumstance that would cause for the termination of that partnership to continue.
Okay.
Aside from something like that, it's usually pretty integrated. It also, we've evolved over the years to become, instead of helping other people, one of the major solutions is to put their vendor position through us instead. And we already have a vendor position as a vendor of record at a lot of these retailers. So there's also a value add to, there's like a synergy that happens when we just add other categories and channels of products in our existing supply chain system that we're already doing and executing well with large retail. So instead of another company trying to figure out how to do it from scratch with limited resources and capabilities, it makes sense to potentially look at just moving their product and their vendor position instead through us as a partner distributor, strategic distributor for them. So that obviously then turns into something a lot more long-term and perpetual, because now we're actually buying and distributing that product
Sure.
as us being the buying and then the vendor.
No, that's an awesome position to be in, and to have 100% recurring revenue, that's a very admirable position as well. So, what would you say your number one point of constraint is? So, if you could remove like one thing, what would help you grow a lot faster?
I think it's really awareness. There's tons of really good brands, and in the last handful of years, the D2C market, especially with COVID, I mean, it really exploded, launching D2C brands, which eliminated a lot of the brick and mortar and traditional retail. So now there's a lot of companies that have really good quality product. They've established a brand, they've created demand for it, but the scaling factor now for their value and the demand at retail, they're knocking maybe on the door saying, you've got this great product, we'd like to carry it. But there's a massive gap between
Sure.
doing direct to consumer fulfillment and being a Walmart or a Target vendor, for instance. So that awareness that we're out here and the level we operate at and outperform even really large companies, but as a small mid-sized business, I really do think just the amplification of that is probably the biggest barrier for us right now, just because it's, we haven't spent any money over the years at ever like marketing or telling our story.
Okay.
So it's now part of
So
the
it's mostly word of
brand.
mouth is where your business comes from?
Yeah, it's come word of mouth, but honestly, it's come more from the retailer.
Okay.
Usually, we'll get a phone call from like Target, for instance, and they'll say, "We've got this really great vendor. We like them. We like the product. We want to keep them, but they're really struggling. They don't understand our business.
Okay.
We want to put them in touch with you, and we've already told them we would like to have them sell the product to you through you to us." And so it's usually a lot of retailer driven. And that's also been kind of our differentiator too, of really trying to establish that continuous value. You always have to add value,
Of
and
course.
adding value at the retail level. If you can get your retailers and the major buyers to actually pick up the phone with other people and say, I really want you to contact these people and I'd like you to work with them because they get our
Sure.
business. That's way stronger than us potentially calling up a million CPG companies saying, hey, how are you doing with your large retailers? And we might be able to help, so.
No, of course it's great. It's great to get those types of referrals. It makes the selling process go so much easier.
Mhm.
So in terms of your work week, how many hours would you say you put in a week, and how do you personally divide up your time as CEO?
Yeah, so that's really tricky for me. I mean, I'm super
As is with most
transparent,
CEOs.
It's extra tricky. I've got a few different businesses that I've started up and launched at the same time, and I'm operating
Okay.
in that capacity as the CEO at the same time. So I'm really pulled in different directions. So how much time do I spend? Way too much, really. I mean, it's it doesn't end. And most entrepreneurs understand this. Like
Sure.
there is no in and out. It's always integrated. But for me in the last handful of years, it's really been on kind of on steroids. So it's 80-hour weeks is not uncommon at all. Just trying to juggle and keep all of that moving.
Sure. So there's a ton on your plate for sure. How good of a delegator would you say you are? And like, what are a couple of things that you've delegated in the last 6 months?
Sure. I've had to learn by necessity to empower, and develop people. So I would say I'm still not a great delegator at all. But I do respect and understand the need for it. And I do believe that uh, a team and other people are more productive than just one,
Sure.
soldier on the field, so
Oh,
to speak. So I'm
totally.
100% on board. I just haven't been able to take the time and implement it correctly and then establish that culture and a training process so that that barrier of going from, rugged entrepreneur, solo individualist kind of thing, and to even if you were to go staff a team, there's a cultural component about building an organization on the inside that is scalable, and that's something I'm quite honestly not very strong at. So it's
Okay.
for me, it's more of I'm in the process of looking for people to come in and partner with me to become more of like an integrator or a president or general manager role of the business and run that and build that culture out, and then allow me to do the parts that really are more what my skill set is, which is a lot more on the business development and ideation side.
Okay. So would you say those two things are central to your approach as CEO? Those are the two big differentiators for you personally?
Yeah, for sure. And as an example, like, so easy one, but like on a successful delegation process, like doing business with the large retailers, obviously you have a million different POs coming in through EDI systems all across the board at the same time all week. And most of the turnaround time, you receive orders, you're shipping within 7 days to all different DCs to different retailers. So it's very, very time sensitive and complex. It sounds, outsourcing even the data entry component
Hmm.
of making sure that all of our order entry is put through the system correctly and timely and accurate all the way through. That was an easy one that at one point, I mean, I was doing all of that on my own not too long ago. As you onboard a new retailer, or as I'm building out this other business that's not the same, but in similar, has to, move all that kind of data. Being able to bring people in and outsource that. And I'm doing it fractionally too. So I'm not even hiring full FTEs to come in and do this. I'm
Right.
finding fractionalized partners where you can empower them to come alongside you, but without necessarily having to build the entire infrastructure inside
Okay.
over and over again.
So it sounds like you're putting in a ton of hours across multiple fronts. What do you do for fun? Do you have any time for fun? And when you do, what do you do for it?
Yeah, I do. I love to have fun. I think play is a very critical component to life
Agreed.
in general, but especially in that entrepreneurial CEO role. I
Sure.
mean, and I believe being intentional about making time to play is very important for the regenerative cycle to open up your creativity
Couldn't
later. And
couldn't
I
agree
think
more.
I think a lot of entrepreneurs and driven, highly driven people in general they overlook maybe the value of being intentional about that.
Yep.
And I almost think that's more important than sleep sometimes. So play for me is very important. But I wind up taking the things I play in and somehow it turns into a new business opportunity, or it somehow
Oh,
turns
nice.
into a part of my work. So my primary outlet is fishing, actually.
Okay.
So a number of years ago,
You definitely get a lot of time to think while fishing.
yeah, too much time, a lot, but but actually it's turned into kind of a profession. So I fish competitively now as a professional
Oh,
angler
nice.
for the past 15 years or so, but it is my fun outlet, but it is parlayed into being another subset of what I do for my living. And the same is true recently, last couple of years, I rediscovered how much I enjoy like sports trading card collecting, right? Like
Okay.
as when I was a child. And that industry has really changed. In the last couple of years, I've gotten heavily involved in that as well, and have recently, have recently built this whole, like, we went on this quest with one of the major companies that manufacturing companies called Tops. Well, there was this bounty that got put out on a release for baseball. Sounds totally out of nowhere here, but the first collector who could assemble this entire complete set of these rare printed insert cards throughout the new release won this prize. So I set out with the local card shop and streaming partners that I've become friends with, and we set out to win that bounty in the last 2 months. That kind of stuff, where then it turns into this big social media promotion and turns into all that. So that's what that's what I do for fun currently.
Oh, that sounds awesome. Well, hopefully we'll see you on one of these fishing competition shows one of these days.
Yeah, well, you can see me on some that's there, but a lot of my friends that have done this now, like, for their living, you definitely are seeing some of my fishing friends that are on the national television circuits right now in the last few years. So
awesome. That's fantastic.
Interesting.
Well, with that, we'll wrap up this episode. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.